Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome to the broadcast here. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am an executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. Guys, I got a great show for you, a great conversation for you. That's what we're talking about tonight. We got a great conversation. We are talking about what no longer serves you, or what's no longer serving you. And obviously, that's going to be a question that you will need to answer. Again, what's no longer serving you? So, uh, before we dive into that, I want for you, each of you, to just kind of be honest. This is the honest zone, and this is not a judgment zone or anything like that. No one's here to poke fingers at you and make certain accusations or anything like that, because I think in some ways, or a lot of ways, uh, a lot of us are dealing with some of the same things. And again, it all affects us differently. But today we're talking about what's no longer serving you. So, once more, that's going to be a question that you will need to answer as it relates to your specific situation. And the bulk of things that are no longer serving us prevent us from growing. That is the undercurrent of that. It is the things that are affecting us emotionally, or things that are not affecting us emotionally, because we're not dealing with those things. We're covering those things up. So naturally, as we continue to cover those things up, we create this scene or this scenario like everything is together, but inwardly we can find ourselves being tormented, dealing with the weight of that thing that we're covering up. Again, mostly, and in most cases, going to be our emotions, or at least the feelings behind that thing. So, if you're joining us again, my name is Curtis Brooks. I'm an executive coach helping high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. Now, this work that I do, working with high achieving men, is it's work. It's work, because at the end of the day, regardless of how much money you earn, people are dealing with stuff, or how much money you don't earn, people, excuse me, people are just dealing with things, and we all deal with those things differently. Most definitely, we all deal with those things differently. So, in dealing with those things, or at least oftentimes the decisions that we have to make in dealing with those things are really just up to us. They really are. And I think that we can find ourselves in a place where let's face it, we don't want to make those decisions. Hey, Deacon Ronnie, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. But we can find ourselves not wanting to deal with those things, not wanting to deal with those decisions, and those decisions have to be made. Oftentimes, in working with high achieving men, I'm working with men who are at the top of their game, at the top of their performance, and in most cases, that is just that is what most of them are dealing with. They're dealing with the performance, the performer, and and it's not such a bad thing, because performance in life, being able to get up and do what you need to do and manage life and take care of life, or even exceed in the different things that you're choosing to excel in life, there's nothing wrong with that. But what happens a lot of times, we're still talking about what's no longer serving you. Okay, we're still talking about that, but I just kind of want to get this off my chest. Oftentimes, in as far as working with high achieving men, the challenge is, and it's not just high achieving men, but it's just people in general, because I think that most of us come from a performance space, if you will, and that's just life, that's society. So if you're going to school, if you attended college, it's all about being performers, just performing, being at your best. Even when our kids may have played sports of some sort, or maybe when you played sports, it was about performing on the field and off the field. Whether if you're a man, how many women you're dating. If you're a woman, just looking your best, and that every guy wants you. So it was always about performing, man or woman. That's just what we know as human beings, is just to perform, to be at our best at all times. Now, the biggest challenge that I often meet with working with high achieving men is that they are just performers for the most part. And so my goal is taking them from performer to actual leader. That's the goal. Is taking them from a performance to an actual leader. Now, because just because you are at the top of your game as a performer or performing at the top of your game, wherever that may look like, in your position, does not necessarily mean that you are a leader. And I often relate leadership to spirituality, because there are a lot of things that takes place in leadership as we know it. Perhaps a leader of an organization, a leader of a small business, whatever the case might be. There are a lot of things that take place in regards to that kind of leadership. But the real leadership comes in from that spiritual space. And oftentimes that is the space that is neglected. And I don't want to get into a bunch of spiritual stuff or scriptures and things of that nature. But again, I just wanted to address that because oftentimes we associate with performance with leadership, and it's not always the same. They're not the same thing. They're completely different things because by nature, I think by nature, most of us know that we need to perform. And I think that's just the gist of it. We get a performance. And when we're not performing to our best, we find ourselves going into some kind of emotional tailspin because we didn't do our best, or we practice all night for a certain event or a certain situation or showtime at 6 o'clock or whatever the case might be. And we practice, we put in the hard work, and all of a sudden it doesn't show up or it doesn't happen the way that you had planned on it to happen. And in most cases, most of us will go through that tailspin emotionally, physically and emotionally, and it begins to wear on us. And so what happens when what we are accustomed to serving, accustomed to going after with, excuse me, excuse me. So what happens when the very thing that we are accustomed to serving, what happens when it no longer serves us? What do we do? Well, in most cases, I think as people, we have a tendency to go back to that thing. I remember years ago, I was praying for something, and it happened. It turned up, and God answered my prayer. Absolutely, He answered my prayer, and I was absolutely excited, obviously. But years later, I found myself trying to go back to that same place, and I mean, really, I was going through the motions, just like envisioning myself in that same place, and it's just, I was in a different place at the time. It's years later, but I was in a different place. But here I was, and trying to envision myself, trying to teleport myself to that same place, that mindset, and just kind of reminiscing on what I was going through at that particular time, and in hopes that God was going to show up at that moment as He had done in the past. And so how many of you know that it didn't work the way that I wanted it to work, but nevertheless, there are things in life that we outgrow. We outgrow situations. Not that I've outgrown God. That's not what I'm saying there, but trying to go back to the same well, so to speak, and expect for the same things to happen as they did 2-3 years, actually it's been years ago, more than 10 years ago. And so trying to expect those same things to show up in a way as they did the last 10 years ago, it almost sounds ridiculous. But when you're searching and when you're trying to see the change in your life and be the change in your life, we can find ourselves doing drastic things. And there I was doing a drastic thing, going back to trying to teleport myself, obviously in my mind, trying to teleport myself to the place where I was um, hoping that God would show up again as He had in the past. And so, obviously, again, we can find ourselves getting to those places where what used to serve us is no longer serving us. I'll give you some examples. As men, we oftentimes deal with anger. A lot of times, it doesn't mean that women don't get angry, but us men, we deal with anger differently sometimes than women do, and sometimes to a point of rage. It happens for us. It happens, myself included, man. So, and there's nothing wrong with getting angry, but it's how we display that anger, how we act on that anger. That is the biggest problem. And so, if we're honest with ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves as men, how much of what used to serve us is no longer serving us, but we find ourselves keep going back to that place, even if it's anger, feeling that thing that we're uh, in a place where it's a loss of control, because I had to face my stuff too and see that anger was really a loss of control. Hey, George Clark, thank you for joining. Appreciate you. Anger was a loss of control. Anger was a loss of control. Anger was a thing that, again, it's a thing that a lot of us deal with as men. But for me, and I think for a lot of us as men, anger is a loss of control. Having a plan or an idea, an expectation of how things should work out, or we've already kind of played it in our mind on exactly what we should expect, just how this thing should unfold. And when it does not quite unfold the way that we have desired it to unfold, being from a space of being very meticulous about how it unfolds, how it happens, what's supposed to happen next. And for me, again, a lot of those things were just mental. Those were my ideas, not shared with my wife or shared with anyone else. It's what I expected. And because I expected it, again, it had to go down in the way that I had meticulously mapped it out, planned it out. And when it did not go as planned, here I was getting angry and doing things and saying things that I probably shouldn't have said. I'm a different person now, but still, it doesn't mean I don't get angry. Absolutely. So we're talking about the things that no longer serve us. Again, there's nothing wrong with getting angry, but it's how we act on that anger. And I think that the key to understanding anger for us as men is really a loss of control. People and things aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and let's just face it. People and things, the kids, the wife, and they're not doing what they should be doing. And she was supposed to be here and the kids were supposed to be there, and it just didn't go down that way. And so what I had to learn, still talking about what no longer serves us, what I had to learn is that my anger was about control. My anger was about control. And perhaps for you, it's not about anger. It might be something else. It might be, I don't know, a host of different things. It might be how you see yourself. We live in a climate now, especially for us as men, where we're not the top of it. Most of us aren't the top of anyone's chart, especially with the women. And so those things have a tendency to affect us even as men. Maybe not all of us, but they do. They have a tendency to affect us. And so from that, we could be dealing with that. So it could be for us as men, our self-image. You know, so there are things, again, it's not just self-image, it's not just anger. There's a host of different things that are out there uh, that in most cases are no longer serving us. But here's what happens oftentimes. We as people, not just men, just people, we can find ourselves uh, being comfortable with the thing, knowing good and well that the thing doesn't work, that outfit doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't work. That situation doesn't work. The relationship doesn't work. The relationship is over with. But we can find ourselves going back to those old relationships. And when I say old relationships, I'm not necessarily talking about people. And I know a lot of times we say, hey, well, relationships obviously with people, but relationships can also be with erroneous thinking as well. Erroneous thinking, an error in our thinking, or how we perceive different things, or how we have perhaps been quick to name something and only to find out once we name that thing. Oftentimes when we name a thing, it's hard to see it differently. But in naming that thing, we could find ourselves being completely wrong about it. But because we've named it, and we begin to build a story behind the very thing that we've created in here, it can be hard to see it as anything else. No, that's just what I see, and that's just what I seen. It's true what I seen. I seen it with my own eyes. But what happened is that we named that thing. And whatever we name it is the thing that we see. And because we see it, oftentimes we can find ourselves. Now, this is not just a man thing, this is just a people thing. But oftentimes, because we've named it, and when we named it, we can actually see it, we can visualize it. And once we visualize it, again, it becomes like an image in our mind. We can find ourselves building an entire story around it. We can find ourselves putting the paintings on the wall and really just building that space up, because that's the thing that we named it. And when we named it, it became the thing that we seen, or that we see with our own eyes. Perhaps no one else sees it, but it becomes a visual for us, if you will. A visual interpretation of what we named. And now that we've named it, we've seen it, we now have dressed this thing up. We're in a relationship with this thing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, relationships doesn't necessarily always have to do with people, because we can be related or relating to the very images and ideas and the things that we may have named in our mind. And we can solely building relationships on erroneous information. And so those things become the things that no longer serve us. Hey, Jacob Cruz, thanks for joining. And that's Jalariel. Thank you for joining as well. Shirley, thank you for joining. But again, yeah, those things can be the things that no longer serve us. And so my question to you, and I started this earlier, and there weren't a whole lot of people in, but people are coming in now. And my statement was to say that this is a no judgment zone. I don't know you, and most of you probably don't know me, but this is a judgment-free zone, because in most cases, the only way to get out of what we've been serving is to admit that we've been serving it. You cannot fix the thing. You cannot fix the thing that's broken if you're unwilling to look at it, if you're unwilling to examine it, if you're willing to assess the damage. And I think that's very interesting because a lot of us as people, especially with us as men, we can find ourselves walking around with a missing arm, so to speak. I'm just using this as an example, missing an arm and acting as if nothing's everything is okie dokie, everything is perfect, and not knowing that we're missing a limb because we fail to assess the things that have taken place, especially when we take these big hits in life emotionally from different experiences, gentlemen. It can be very difficult for us to assess those things. Not impossible, but it can be difficult because oftentimes we are not, as men, we are not wired to assess certain things. We have been created or designed, if you will, and not necessarily by God, but we've been designed. We've been obviously been designed by God. Let me clear that up. We've been designed by God, but society has us all in a place where we are performing. We're on it can feel like we're on a stage, and at some point life just gets exhausting. It just puts us in a place where we're just bearing the weight of just stuff, our stuff, their stuff, and whoever else wants to dump on us, and we just take it because ultimately we can find ourselves again as performers in life, because that's what life requires of us. It requires us to perform at our best at all times. And when we don't perform at our best at all times, or at least feel that we're up to speed, we can find ourselves going through some kind of emotional tailspin because it's something in us just of how we're wired. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that we should be responding in that way, but that ultimately is what we've learned to do. And because we've learned to do these things, or this level of performance, we can find ourselves just go, 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 go. And everything that is living and breathing is designed to rest, is to get sleep, is to find opportunities to take care of yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going out buying just a bunch of stuff that you can't afford, but take care of yourself mentally and emotionally. If that means reaching out to someone like myself as a coach, that's what you do. Because ultimately, we can find ourselves carrying the weight of just so much stuff. Here's an interesting thing that I have been talking with a client about recently. And this is a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago. For those who are spiritual, you may understand. And for those who aren't spiritual, you may not understand. But if you have some kind of inkling or a little bit of spirituality, you might understand. But what happens is that we, myself, you, and just people in general, we're in most cases dealing with the work that our parents did not finish. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks, I think it's Psalms 23, it talks about the valley, walking through the valley. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thou rod and staff comfort me. So that scripture talks about God being with you and I in the valley. When we walk through those dark places, those unknown places, those places that we're just, in most cases, in some cases, completely terrified of. You might hear the term shadow work. This is the valley that people will be going through, because for most of us, we have work to do. We have work to do. We have the shadow work to do. And this is the kind of the term that psychologists use, and I believe it comes from Carl Jung, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But he talks about the shadow work that needs to be done. And this is the valley that every man and woman, child will walk through. And this is the valley that many of us have been walking through for so long, and we can find ourselves having to repeat the cycles. Not because we want to, but because the cycle is the operating system in the background that we often don't see. And because that cycle has become a part of our DNA. And I know this because I'm also a client. I know this because I've also had to walk through the valleys as well. It's not easy. It is not easy, but it's not impossible. And the wonderful thing about it is that when you and I are prepared to walk through this valley, we will come into a greater understanding of that cycle, that circle that we keep going around and around and around. All of those deja vu moments to where, okay, wait a minute, I've been here before. So as we are going through this valley, know that the valley is a must. It doesn't matter how much money you have, because most of you know, like I know, that there are many very wealthy people who have offed themselves. Of very many people who have decided to say they did not want to be here anymore. So I'm saying that to say that it's definitely not about your social and economic status. Every person will have to walk through this valley. Every person will. And when you begin to start walking this valley, you'll see the circles, the many circles that each of us have just find ourselves being drawn to, so to speak. Again, there's an operating system in the background. We can find ourselves being drawn to that system of things. And when that system of things have been taken away from us, perhaps even through relationships, toxic relationships, men and women both, okay, abusive relationships on different levels, we can find ourselves, again, that cycle over and over. But when in fact, there's a operating system that's taking place or doing what it does in the background, and it's called the shadow work. The shadow work is not just your work, but it's the work of your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. And now when I say this, it's not about blaming anyone, because let's face it, if you're over the age of 18 or maybe before that, you've dealt with some things. Life is not easy, ladies and gentlemen. This is just stuff what people have placed upon us and decisions people have made for our lives, and right or wrong, but nevertheless, life can absolutely have its challenges. It's full of different challenges, but it does not mean that we can't go through those challenges and get through those challenges. And most importantly, a lot of times the reason why we can't get through those challenges is because of the operating system in the background. And this is why, as an executive coach to high achieving men, this is the bulk of what I'm working with them on. And oftentimes I've had to really establish a footing and an understanding with a lot of these men, because they'll come off with their money. And I know that their money doesn't matter. And I know most of the time, and working with a lot of high achieving men, life is oftentimes not how they present it. Now, this is not a dig to a gentleman or a man who has achieved certain status. It's not a dig. It's just that oftentimes, from my experience, I've learned that life is difficult. And for a lot of times, men who are high achievers, and I would imagine for women who are high achievers as well, they will often forego or forsaken the relationship with people because let's face it, when you're dealing with this valley stuff, as I just mentioned to you, and then you're dealing with your valley stuff, in most cases we haven't dealt with it, we don't even know that it's there. And now you got the other person dealing with their valley stuff or their shadow work that in most cases they haven't even touched it or don't even know that it's there. Relationships can be difficult, not impossible, for the person who understands the more of the inner workings, the person who's ready to come out of those things, because we were created to relate to each other. Relationships bring for each of us some wonderful things in life when they're healthy relationships. And so what happens with high achieving men and women oftentimes is that they will forsaken or forgo relationships because it's easier to work with the very thing that is a known, meaning that my job requires me to do X, Y, Z. These are things that I know. These things that I can perform. And even if I make a mistake, I can go back to the drawing board and tweak things here and there. Again, these are knowns. They're not variables, but relationships oftentimes are the variables, things that we don't know. That operating system that's doing what it does in the background. Those are the variables. Because as I mentioned earlier, in most cases, what takes place is that the past stuff that our parents have not dealt with, including for a lot of us as men, anger, how our parents may have dealt with conflict or lack thereof, whatever the case might be. And so because our parents have not dealt with it, it makes its way down the food chain, so to speak, or up the food chain, however you want to look at it. It makes itself down the food chain or up the food chain, and now it's placed in our lap. And we have to contend with those things. So well before we can come into who we are or understand coming into our own purpose, we've got to deal with that valley stuff. That valley stuff is real, ladies and gentlemen. It's real. And it will absolutely or can possibly take you out because it's so heavy. We don't know, and I'm going to say this, we don't know the sins of our fathers and mothers. We don't know all the stuff that was done in the past. So now, as that ball starting off perhaps this small and it's rolling downhill or uphill, however you want to look at it, it's now become massive. And now it's sitting in this dispensation of time. It's in our laps, respectively. In each of our situations, we've got to deal with them. And it can be tough dealing with those things. Again, we can absolutely get through this. For sure, we can get through this. But you have to know what you're dealing with. If your mother or your father was a yeller, a lot of yelling took place in my household too. So if your parents was a yeller, or yellers, I should say, high strung emotionally, in most cases, guess what? You're going to be high strung emotionally. And again, can't say all, but good part of you will mimic the very characteristics of your parents. And so at some point, we're still talking about outgrowing, we're still talking about um, outgrowing the things that are outgrowing the things that no longer serve you. I've got the title of my conversation here. But nevertheless, we're still talking about that. What's no longer serving you? And in order to know what's no longer serving you, you and I will have to walk through this valley. Because somehow, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you cannot name that thing, you can't even begin to see it, obviously. If you don't know what it looks like. And if you can't name it, you can't see it, you can't fix it. So it can absolutely appear like it's invisible, when in fact, it's not invisible. It's not even a mystery anymore. But because it appears invisible, because it can feel like I found myself in the same place as I was last year and the year before and the year before, precisely the reason why I don't make New Year's resolutions. I'm just tossing it out as an example. Or set goals, whatever the case might be, because I'm still in the same place as I was the year before, 2025, 2024, 2023, and so on and so forth. I'm still in that same place. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the operating system. See, understand this now. Every living thing, I'll say it this way, every living thing has a beginning. Every living thing has a beginning. And oftentimes, it's the things that we have come into years later, or the people that we have become, being born into this world as the offspring of our parents. But even before we were born into this world, there was a beginning. There were actions and behaviors and mannerisms that were already out there. And so they represent a beginning that already existed. And so you were born into that thing. Now, this is good now. Come on now. This is good. You were actually born into that thing. And so, however you had come into this thing called life, the beginning still existed. And that beginning, however people lived or chose not to live, again, we're talking about the DNA of our beings, or who we are, how our parents dealt with conflict or chose not to deal with conflict, sweeping things under the rug, or not today, I don't want to talk about it, didn't discuss things, or whatever the case might be. Again, guys, too numerous to name. However it may have ended up from the beginning, traveling, however we may have entered into this space, it does not negate the beginning. So you and I are not the beginning. We've come somewhere in this line of stuff, but we are not the beginning. And so naturally, What happens is that we're picking up all of that stuff. We're picking up all of those things, behaviors and mannerisms and the characteristics, the integrity or their lack thereof. We're picking up all of that stuff, and we're been born into it now. So what looks like your beginning is truly not your beginning. You've come in on some stuff that was unfinished. And so now we're dealing with the unfinished work of what our parents did not finish. And again, this is not blaming anyone, but understand this works on such a deeper level than what you're looking at, what you and I are looking at or have been experiencing. This is the operating system that's doing what it's doing in the background, operating, appearing to be operating in stealth mode, because that's absolutely what it can feel like at times. But when you uncover certain things, you begin to understand certain things. It's not a stealth mode. It's just that from our viewpoint, from our vantage point, our stuff or that we may have done, we covered it up. So what we covered up, we may think is a beginning. It's no beginning. We covered it up from that point, from that perspective, from that angle. But there's a whole trail of stuff that's knocking on our doors, so to speak, waiting to get in, waiting to show up, waiting to introduce itself to us. Because we are not the beginning. And so, because of that, we've got to deal with some stuff. So if you can find yourself going in a circle in life sometimes and wondering why I keep repeating the same things, that was me too at a time in my life. Absolutely. I'm not here to share some with you that I didn't go through myself. No. That would be dishonest, disgenuine. Absolutely not. I'm also a client, for sure. So I've done the work, still doing the work. I don't know if the work even ever ends, man. I don't know if there's I don't even know if the work ever ends, but nevertheless, it's important. It's necessary. Tamiko Rice, thank you for joining. Angelina, thank you for joining. Chris Stuss, thank you for joining. Humble all one or all none. Apologize if I chopped that up there. Thank you for joining. So there's quite a few of you, quite a few of you in here. Mary, thank you for joining. Gloria Jackson 6, Flora, thank you for joining. And that's Bon Typyes. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate you. Achiever, thank you for joining as well. So I hope that makes sense, guys. I felt really good. I felt a charge with that one. Yeah, I was excited about that one. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. Is that to know that you and I are not the beginning. And when we can understand that we're not the beginning of any of this, we'll know, we'll be able to file things correctly from the proper perspective and know that, hey, I've got some work to do. And most of the stuff that's just happening in life, guys, it's a distraction for you. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. A lot of the stuff that you guys are listening to, the news, this stuff is a distraction, man. It keeps you preoccupied. And I thought about the word television, and most of you may have looked at it from this angle, but more recently, I had known this, but sometimes when you hear things again, the second and third time, it just like, wow. And I thought about the word television and how the word television and just it tells us what it is. It's the vision of someone else's. It's someone else's vision. They're telling it to us. And we can find ourselves, hey, there was a time in my life as a kid, I watched all kinds of television, did all kinds of things. And there are times even now I would binge watch certain shows, whatever the case might be. But the bulk of life, ladies and gentlemen, is a distraction. Even what I just shared with you in regards to you and I not being the beginning. People just don't wake up and share stuff like that. That's because I'm doing the work, ladies and gentlemen. This is a spiritual battle that we're on, or that we're in. So I didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, this is what happens here. This is how this works. No, this is because I have a relationship, this spirituality thing. I have a relationship with God. This is what this is about more so than anything. I didn't come here to give you some of the same stuff that you already have. I want you to experience some of the things that I've experienced. And I'm not saying that I'm the one. I'm not saying that. I'm saying when you put these things in the proper perspective, this stuff, life, all of this stuff, it's a lot of it. It is a distraction to keep you away from knowing thyself. Because when you know thyself, there in itself is an energy behind it. And when your energy and my energy has been disrupted, we can find it just all over the place. And when the energy is all over the place, we are less effective. But when your energy is concentrated, focused, let's just say you are in school wanting to, giving a good example. Many years ago, it's been years ago now, but my mother was going to school. She was a older student. And in any event, she was going to school, and my sister, my younger sister, I was grown at the time. My younger sister, Dorian, she was just all over the place. She would, it's just trying to figure her life out, I guess, just going through a bunch of different things. And I can remember asking my mother, I said, Mom, how on God's green earth are you doing what you're doing? Because while my sister had run away, she's in a much better place now. This is when she was a teenager. Matter of fact, her father, my stepfather, had passed away, but we have known him. I've known him as my father, but her biological father had passed away. And so she was dealing with that. It was really heavy for her, obviously. But anyways, she dealt with it in a way that she knew how to deal with it. And so I would ask my mom, I said, Mom, how on God's green earth are you managing all this stuff, knowing that, or not knowing where your daughter is, and trying to attend a household? There's 5 kids. How are you doing that? Focus. Her answer was to me that, Curtis, I've had to separate some things. Much like if we're washing clothes, doing laundry. We've got to make sure the whites are separated from the colors and things of that nature, dark colors in their own pile, and the whites yet in their own pile. Because when we don't, all of this stuff just meshes, and the white towels are blue, and because of the dark colors. So it makes sense to separate some things. It makes sense to put some things in order. Because when things are out of order, especially in the way of this valley that I was sharing with you, because the valley is the operating system, that shadow work that needs to be done. The valley is the operating system that is operating behind the scenes, appearing to be invisible, appearing to be a mystery, because it can feel to some of us that every time I take 2 steps, I'm not back 3 or 4. It's the operating system. It's the operating system. It's the work that a lot of us are reluctant to do for various reasons. And this is not a dig at you or anyone else, because again, the work is not easy. It's not easy because we don't know what all the stuff that our parents may have done. But nevertheless, you and I are dealing with the effects of it, so to speak. The wind has blown, and we don't see the wind blowing. I think this is a great analogy. But because we don't see the wind blowing, we may not even be able to tell the direction. But we know the wind is blowing because we see the effects of the wind. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're dealing with. The wind of our past, so to speak, is blown. It's blowing. And it's taken with it the mannerisms, the characteristics, the personalities of our ancestors. It's taken with it all of those things that now make us who we are. And as a result, oftentimes we can find ourselves maybe looking like our grandfather on our father's side. That's interesting, isn't it? How all of those things, again, building themselves up like the wind has blown. We don't know where it's coming from, or we don't see the wind blowing. We only see the effects of the wind. And the effects of the wind is what we're dealing with right now. Those are the valleys that you and I will have to walk through. Like I said earlier, opening with this conversation, I am a executive coach. I primarily work with men. And so if you find yourself in need of having to have more questions answered as it relates to this conversation, if you find yourself stagnant in that space, perhaps again, I work with mostly men who are high achievers. And regardless of your income, what happens is that every person will have to go through this valley. Every person will have to go through this valley. It does not matter what your social status is, economically, where you fit in. It does not matter. It doesn't matter if you only got 2 pennies, two quarters to rub together. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money you make, what color you are, what your background is. It doesn't matter. Every person will have to walk through this valley. If you've heard what I said to you earlier about you and I not being the beginning, and that there was already a beginning, and now the wind has blown. Again, we don't see the wind blowing, we see the effects of the wind. And so now what the wind has brought in is the things that we're dealing with right now, the effects of that. And it's all playing itself out differently for each of us. Some of us will sabotage certain things, sabotage relationships. Some of us will sabotage just things in our job, find ourselves always bickering and fighting with each other, fighting with people. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It's just that there's some things that we need to be prepared to do some self-reflection. Because I guarantee you, the more you and I start doing that self-reflection, the more the stuff will start coming up. And that's exactly what we need. We need for it to come up so that we can see it. And when we can see it, we can name it. And when we can name it, and we can, let's say it this way. When we can see it, when we can name it, we can see it or see it, can name it, however, and we can deal with it. But until then, it's like a man fighting his own shadow. He doesn't know what it is. Beating the air. So again, there's quite a few of you in here. So again, guys, I thank you for joining in. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully it has made a lot of sense. Yeah, hopefully this conversation has made a lot of sense. It's touched your heart. It has provoked you to look at things deeper. It has provoked you to be honest with yourself and know that, again, this is, in fact, a judgment-free zone. I don't know most of you. You don't know me. And it's not about judging. It's about getting this thing right, guys, because if we don't get it right, someone else or life will continue to place the burdens on us. And again, the bulk of what we're trying to get out of or to set ourselves free from is the stuff that had taken place from the beginning, that the wind had blown in, and now we're dealing with it. And in most cases, we don't know what we're dealing with. So that means that it takes time to sit still. You got to be prepared to sit still and talk this thing out, have these conversations. And be prepared to address some things. Because when we're not, rest assured, the load gets heavy. Because if you're not dealing with your stuff, let's just say you're married. If you're not dealing with your stuff, there's a good chance your wife may not be dealing with her stuff. There's a good chance that the kids, obviously, in most cases, won't even begin to know what to deal with. So they've got stuff too. So can you imagine the chaos that is created? And even on a larger scale, there's not a whole lot of people who are having these conversations. I'm not saying I'm the only person that's having this kind of conversation now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are not a lot of people who are discussing these kind of conversations where we can begin to do the work and solve some problems. Not keep dancing around the same tree, tripping over the same sandwich. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that we do this work. I don't have any information that I can put on the screen right now, but if you're so inclined, I think there's some kind of form to fill out that I created through TikTok. So if you're so inclined as a man interested in working with me, or just you got questions, fill out that form, leave your information there on that document there, and I'll be surely to reach out to you in regards to any questions you might have. So again, guys, we've been talking about, what the heck is the name of this conversation here? We've been talking about, forgetting the title of this conversation, what's no longer serving you. And again, this has not been a judgment call for anyone. It is for you to answer that question, what's no longer serving you. It's for you to be honest with yourself. and know that, hey, people are dealing with their own stuff, man. Let's just face it. People are so enamored with their own stuff. Years ago, really quick story here. Years ago, as a kid, years ago, long time ago, but any event, as a youth, I remember growing up with my grandparents, mostly, stayed with my grandmother. My family was pretty close knit family. It was that family that would always say, "Hey, I love you," blah, you kiss each other in the cheek and stuff like that. Just got along pretty well. And I can remember as a youth when I began to get out in the world and get a job and stuff like that. I would find myself, I don't know what was going on with me, but I would find myself, um, I think it was like I was seeking approval for something. I don't know where it came from, but that's what was going on. But I found myself saying hi to people. I would, just hi to people, wave to people, and that's just because that was my personality. And some people would wave back, and others wouldn't wave back. And the people who waved back, I was like, whoa, I was elated. I was in a great mood. But for the people who didn't wave back, all of a sudden I found myself going inward, internalizing that, and trying to figure out why they didn't wave back. Wow, it's just a human thing to do. This is the truth. I'm telling you how I was going through this cycle in my mind. I don't know what was going on, but I later on began to look at that thing, and I'm sharing this with you is because this is a part of that valley. This is a part of that valley sometimes that comes up. The things that we do, our behaviors, our mannerisms, these are part of that valley. And can you imagine all the dreams? Now, this is good. This is really good here. Can you imagine all the dreams and ideas that you and I might have growing up, where we wanted to be a fireman, a doctor, a lawyer, just a host of different things? Can you imagine now from this angle, this perspective? You see our hopes and dreams on top of all that other stuff. Can you imagine how long that could possibly take to become that lawyer, doctor, fireman, whatever? I'm just kind of throwing that out. A teacher, professor, doesn't matter. Can you imagine how long that could take in life, not knowing what, in fact, is in your valley, the shadow work that needs to be done? Now, you, as a human being, as a young person, you got your own dreams, you got your own ideas. You can see yourself, you can envision it. And you have your stuff stacked on top of all the other stuff, like a waiting list. And each of the things are just waiting in line, waiting their turn. Because in most cases, much like the situation I shared with you, things I was going through as a young person, those things show up at the most inopportune moments. They do. They show up in the way of people that we love, like our wives, our significant other, our kids, how we sometimes talk with our kids, how we respond to things in life. All those things have a tendency to show up, because when we get close to building relationships, when we get close to finding that thing, trying to uncover that thing, close to trying to fulfill that dream. This is good now. When we get close there, all of a sudden, it seems like the stuff the stuff that we knew nothing about, it starts taking its turns, rearing its ugly head into, in most cases, we can't even explain what's happening. But nevertheless, those things have a tendency, because it's the operating system, they have a tendency to take precedence over and beyond the dreams that we have, because they're the operating system that's operating in the background. And so well before we can get to the dreams, and in most cases, we'll go through hell and high water, because we've got to get through that valley of darkness, the things that are unknown. But even for that situation I was explaining for myself, I was a flight attendant, and at this point, I'm in my 30s, my early 30s. No, I take it back. No, I was in my early 30s. I was late 20s, about 27, 26 or 27, late 30s, or mid to late 20s. I apologize. And so here I was dealing with that thing. I became a flight attendant. I'm going to share with you how I was able to overcome that thing, because life sometimes is funny. But I became a flight attendant with a major airline. And once I finished my training, take a good guess what my first job was. I was the low man on the totem poles. And if you're familiar with the airline industry, with a lot of different businesses out there, they work by seniority. So I was a brand new flight attendant, low man on the totem pole. And my job was to greet people. So I had to revisit those things, because I had got to the point when I was, even before I became a flight attendant, I had done better with that in life, but here I was now revisiting the challenge I was having, whereas that when people didn't speak to me, I was taken back. I was all of a sudden beginning to internalize these things. But now, as a flight attendant, I'm standing in front of people, and some people are speaking, some people are not. Some people look me dead in the eye and didn't put their head down. I had to deal with those things. I had to get over those things. I had to begin to put those things in the right order, put them in a proper perspective. Again, I have no idea where that stuff came from, because as a kid, I was somewhat shy. I'll be honest, I was somewhat shy. But around my family, I was outgoing, and I was outgoing around my family. But again, as I became an adult, got a job and stuff like that, that was the stuff I was dealing with. I don't deal with that anymore, but I'm just saying that was some stuff that I had no idea. It never showed up while I was in my household with my parents, my family. It only showed up when I left the house or became an adult, started working outside the house. And I dealt with that for years. And so when I took that job as a flight attendant, I was, again, my mid to late 20s dealing with that, and finally had got over it, finally had mastered that thing, overcame that situation, because I needed to break it. I needed to break that thing, because once I broke that thing, it allowed me to experience other levels, new opportunities. And so even for you, those who are listening, Most of you will not be able to experience new things. Not because you can't, not because they're not afforded to, but you have to get over the thing that's no longer serving you. And when you get over the thing that's no longer serving you, you'll see that the doors will open. Now, in most cases, it's not going to be a whole bunch of fanfare. There's not going to be the sound effects of these big, huge doors opening, lightning and thunder. But you'll know. You'll know. That may not be the answer you're looking for, but you will know. You'll know when you've overcome that thing, when you've mastered that thing. And I don't even like to use the word master, but I've come to understand is that you have to master that thing. Because if you don't master it, it will master you and I. Not necessarily because of its sheer size. No. Because of the uncertainty, because of the doubt, of the not knowing, or the mystery that's behind it. The mystery that could be behind it. When in fact, it's like the Wizard of Oz. There was this huge voice, only to find out the voice was the voice of Oz. It was the voice of a man behind the curtain. So I want to encourage each of you to not be afraid to walk through that valley, because you will. You'll have to walk through that valley in order to begin to tap into where you want to go. It's not because you can't do it, not because you're not able to do it, but you've got to get through the layers of the stuff that were already a beginning. Remember when I said you and I are not the beginning. We're not the beginning. And because we're not the beginning, there are some things that have become a part of our DNA, so to speak. The characteristics, the mannerisms, the habits. Excuse me. The shame is a big one. The guilt is a big one. Some of your parents may have dealt with shame. Some of your parents may have dealt with guilt. And because they didn't deal with it, they didn't overcome it, because they weren't healed, guess what happens? You and I can have a tendency to hold on to the things that we could have easily overcome if we talk about them. We can deal with the shame of our parents because they have not mastered it. They have not come into healing. And if they haven't come into healing, it now becomes our stuff. And in most cases, we will pick up the same mannerisms. It's like a doctor, or like when you visit a doctor. The doctor ideally, or typically in some situations, I guess it would have to do with what you may be dealing with, or what your reason is for going to the doctor. And so the doctor might ask you, what's your history? Did your parents have this? Did your parents have that? Those things are important, because in most cases, if your parents had it, it doesn't mean that you will, but It's a good chance because somehow the wind blows or has blown, and the effects of the wind blowing has placed these things in our lap. These things have now become part of our DNA. And so, how mom may have dealt with situations that she may have been embarrassed about and that she's ashamed of, we can find ourselves dealing with things in life, being ashamed to the point where being embarrassed to the point of shame, causing shame. And when the shame sits in, we can find ourselves shrinking back on life, not feeling as that though we're worthy of it. Serving that shame, because that's what happens. We become a servant to shame. Because the more we feed shame, the bigger shame gets. The more you feed the guilt, you become a servant to the guilt. The more you feed it, the heavier the burden becomes, to the point where the guilty finds themselves shrinking back in life. The guilty can't believe that they're innocent. The guilty feels like they're deserving of all the things that have happened to them in life. The shameful person feels like, oh, it's my fault, it's my fault, it's my fault. When in fact, it's not your fault. It's the things that have not been resolved well before you and I were even thought about. And as a result, it's become part of our DNA. And because it's become part of our DNA, it's become our mannerisms, our habits, our default thinking, so to speak. So I want to end this with this. We might have to be prepared, not might, you'll have to be prepared to clean out someone else's closet in order to find the treasure that you have and the treasure that you are already. Other people's stuff can make us burden down. It can absolutely make life feel like it's not worth anything, when in fact, all of their stuff is on top of us. And we've got to, as I often like to say, we've got to find ourselves, dig ourselves out from under the rubble. So that being said, guys, like I said before earlier, there's a document that TikTok might place on the screen, or you might see on the screen where you can fill it out. Again, I primarily work with men. I'm executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence, guys. So hopefully this conversation has been a blessing to you, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for tuning in. So there's quite a few of you. So Stephanie Disk, King Nova, Insight BG, Charlotte, Jade, Timbo. There's quite a few of you all. And again, I really, really appreciate you all chiming in on this conversation. And once more, hopefully it's been a blessing to you. And I'm going to say good night. So last thing, if you need help with any of the things we've talked about, or you got something else as a man, you've got some other things you want to talk about, fill out the document or the form there. And I will go back on TikTok and look for it and reach out to you. So we will chat with you soon. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.